and welcome to this webcast. This is my colleague Ken McConnell from the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario, also known as FedDev Ontario. And my name is Nathalie Brabant, and I'm with the Federal Economic Development Initiative for Northern Ontario, also known as FedNor. Both of these organizations help address key economic development challenges by providing regionally tailored programs, services, knowledge, and expertise. If you want more information on our funding programs or services, please check us out online. If you're considering working with the defense industry, this presentation is for you. It's designed to offer you some things to think about before you go into a meeting with a defense contractor. The information in this presentation is based on things we've heard from both suppliers and defense contractors over the years. Just remember, you know your business best, and only you can decide how best to carry out your business activities. It's our hope that at the end of this presentation, you'll leave with information you didn't know before and a few things to think about. We'd like to encourage you to send in your questions during the presentation, and we'll be happy to answer them at the end. Bonjour et bienvenue à tous nos auditeurs. Bien que la présentation d'aujourd'hui aura lieu en anglais, il nous fera plaisir de répondre à vos questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix, en anglais ou en français. Si vous désirez une copie de la présentation en français, veuillez s'il vous plaît communiquer avec nous. Vous trouverez nos coordonnées à la fin de la présentation. Alors, sans plus tarder, commençons. So you're going to meet with a defense contractor. Ken, how does one even begin to prepare for that?
Well, thank you, Natalie. I appreciate that. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So over the next few slides, I'm going to set out a few things that you may want to think about and get clear in your mind before your meeting. In our view, doing this may serve to help your business pitch to the defense contractor. So let's look at the first slide, and let's start with some basics. So why do you want to work with this company? Maybe you feel your products and services are well aligned, or maybe your values are aligned. Why do you think you can work with them? Have you worked with the contractor you're meeting with before? Are you an approved supplier? If the answer to either of these are yes, please make sure that when you're meeting, you still mention this. Defense companies, as Natalie knows, are huge, and so the person with whom you'll meet may not know of any of your previous experience. Regardless of whether you work with them before, there are a number of factors which can influence whether or not you can work with this company. One of these is your financial resources. So do you have the financial resources to see the project through to the end? For some higher assembly projects and products, there may be many design reviews and meetings over the life of this, even before you get to a stage where something is actually made, work begins, and payment is made. So a supplier must have the financial resources to be able to participate in the design and product reviews. So another factor is after-sales support. Do you offer this? This is critical for defense contractors as they rely on its suppliers for product support through the life of the system. Now, Natalie, as you know, this type of support could involve manuals, repairs, spare parts, and training. Now, let's look at the next three questions together. What message do you want to give them? What do you want them to know about you? And what sets you apart? So at this point, I want to introduce a term that we know very well, which is differentiator. What is your differentiator? Before you can clearly tell a defense contractor who you are, you need to be able to get clear in your own mind what makes you different from other suppliers. So consider in Ontario, there may be dozens of other suppliers who do similar things to what you do, let alone across Canada, there may be hundreds. It is really important for you to be able to set out during your meeting what makes you different from these other ones. What's your differentiator? Natalie, could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Now, let's consider the defense contractor itself for a moment. Before you sit down with them, you may want to ensure you have a good grasp of who they are. So, who are they and where are their offices? What products and services do they offer? Are they part of a larger family of companies? So, if you agree to do some research before your meeting on these companies, how should you go about it? Well, one good place I think we find, certainly in our own work, is the website of these defense contractors themselves. It's usually an excellent place to start. Most of these are actually quite informative. And when you're going through, consider W5. Try to find out the who, what, when, where, and why. The full scope of the different things they do and the different questions that could come in your mind. Look at, where's the company headquartered? Where's their Canadian office? Do they have a Canadian office? Are they focused on a particular kind of vehicle or platform? Or are they like a Lockheed Martin who works on a bunch of different types of things across a whole bunch of platforms? You can also do a search on the web for articles on the company, on projects they've been awarded or products they've developed. And you can also see whether or not they have a commercial line that may be relevant to the type of work you do. Now, further down on the slide, have they publicly announced their interest in specific procurements? And if so, what type of Canadian products or services will the defense contractor likely need and want? Well, this is really something you should research. Now, some of this will be intuitive. If you know the company with whom you met had previously bid on a truck contract, and if there's another truck contract coming up for tender, you can be fairly certain that they'll at least be considering it. Other ones are a little bit more complex because if it involves a certain type of system or other type of technology, it may be not quite as clear. Regardless, doing a web search is one good way to start. And try to find out your best what they are trying to look for in Canada. Are they looking to bid on the future fighter procurement? Are they looking to bid on logistics vehicle modernization, et cetera? This will really help you to try to focus in when you have your discussion and link in with what you do. If you do all this work, it will give the company with whom you are meeting a real sense that you're serious about doing business with them. Now, information on upcoming projects can be found in a few different places. Canada has something called the Defense Acquisition Guide, or DAG. Now, the last time this was updated was in 2016. You can still find that online. We're told, we'll see if that happens, that later this year there's going to be an update to this again. And it's a good way to look at things across the platforms, air, land, marine, so on. You can also look at Buy and Sell. That's Canada's procurement website. And it's a place where you can look up and try to get a sense on information on projects that have been put up there. The other thing is every April, the Armed Forces Outlooks take place in Ottawa. This year it'll be April 10th, 11th, and 12th, and that's a great place to get a lot of information firsthand from the users, that is, from the Department of National Defense. And let's not forget that you can reach out to us at any point, your regional development agencies, and we're here to help you. Natalie, could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. All right. So you've thought about why you want to work with a company, and you've done some research on the defense contractor itself. Now, you may want to give some thought as to how you can explain your own business, because this is critical. So let's look at the first four points on this slide. How big is your company? Do you have a quality control process, and can you explain it? Do you have an inventory tracking system? And what certifications does your company have? So, I mean, we understand, Natalie, right? How big your company is relevant for a couple of reasons. Firstly, in the Canadian defense space, a company that is under 250 employees is considered a small and medium enterprise. Now, this is important because defense contractors are required under the offset policy in Canada to place work, on average about 10% of the work, with a Canadian SME. Secondly, the size of your company is also relevant because a defense contractor will need to understand your capacity to carry out the work. In other words, what kind of volumes can you handle? If you are a small company, I suggest that before you go to your meeting, you may wish to be prepared to speak to your capacity and the measures you could take to accommodate extra work. Now, Are you able to explain what your processes, internal and external, are if a defense contractor asks? Both quality and inventory control are really important considerations for a defense contractor. These companies want to know how a potential supplier manages these elements because there's a lot at stake. It's not just all the money they're putting into this contract. Think about the types of platforms these are going on. If a part fails, it could risk lives. So this is why these things are really important. Now, what are your individual certifications? Can you speak to the full range? First and foremost, a defense contractor will want to know, are you Canadian Controlled Goods certified? Now, as Natalie and I know very well, this is something that they'll ask for. And in fact, you'll find that some defense contractors will not even enter into a serious discussion with you if you are not Controlled Goods certified. The other certifications will involve your industrial capabilities. For aerospace, these could be AS certifications. For other, it could be ISO certifications. Regardless, some contractors will ask during meetings and some won't, but at least be prepared to speak to them. Now, the last bullet on the slide is the most important for you to consider. What's your Canadian content value? So do you know what Canadian content is? Well, and I'll read this. Put simply, Canadian content value is the part of the selling price of a product or service that includes Canadian labor and materials. It does not include parts of the product or service that have been imported into Canada from elsewhere. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because a defense contractor can only be credited under offset obligations for things that have Canadian content value. So you need to understand what your Canadian content is. And there's a number of places online where you can go to be able to calculate this and to really understand what it is. So, I mean, a good piece of advice, we were talking about this before the webcast, is that if you go into a meeting and you sit down and you say, my Canadian content value on a particular product is 100%, be prepared. The defense contractor will challenge you on that point because they're going to want to make sure that that's accurate. So just be prepared for that. The bottom line here is, in order to maximize your potential play and benefit under defense contract, you need to maximize your Canadian content. Natalie, could I have the next slide, please? Now, lastly for me, as part of your preparation, thinking about the environment in which you play is really important. Do you know who your competitors are? More importantly, do you know what makes you different from your competitors? So this gets back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of your differentiator. Bear in mind that firms may, other firms who are your competitors may have already engaged with the defense contractor you're meeting, or they could already be suppliers of them. That makes it even more important that you're able to speak to what sets you apart from them. Have you ever done work on a defense project before? If you have, this is relevant from a standpoint of experience. You should also be able to speak to who you worked with, what type of work you did. Look, it's not necessary to have previous experience, but it's a bonus. And regardless of whether you have or not, defense contractors will want you to demonstrate reliability in terms of quality and in terms of on-time delivery. Now, the third point on this slide is critical. Do you understand offset benefits? And I certainly know, for Natalie and I, this is a complex enough proposition. But if you aren't familiar with industrial and technological benefits or with value propositions, I strongly suggest that you become familiar with them. ITB policy is what influences defense contractors to meet with you, very simply. Why? Because they're required to put full value of the contract that they win in terms of work into Canada. So this is why they're going to meet with you, because they need Canadian suppliers. Now, a key component of the policy, which was introduced in 2014, is called the value proposition. In a nutshell, the government sets out a bunch of things that a contractor has to respond to for points in order to try to win the bid. And this includes how will they provide long-term economic value with this contract to Canada. And it defines areas where defense contractors need to invest. So ITB policy and value propositions matter to defense contractors, so they should matter to you. So I really strongly suggest you not go into a meeting without becoming familiar with these. Now, information on these can be found on the ISED website, the Innovation, Science and Economic Development website. You can also look to buy and sell to try to look up prior RFPs or current RFPs, because they'll set out the parameters that the offset benefits will have for these specific projects. And it will illustrate the types of things that defense contractors will have to work toward. Now, the last point in this slide reflects, I know, a key truth about the defense space in Canada, which is that this is a long process. This can be a very long process. Contractors will want to know if you have the manpower and the commitment to pursue and follow through on defense business over the medium and the long term. Specifically, they'll want to know if you have the people and the capacity, that is, the workload management to do this. All right, you've considered all these elements before the meeting, you've done your research. Natalie, tell us what's next.
Thanks, Ken. So that's a lot of information to think about. And at this point, you might be wondering, what's the point? What's the why of this first meeting? And you should consider that it's more than just establishing a first point of contact. It's about trying to get a second meeting, which will hopefully lead to a long-term business relationship. But how do you do that? Well, at the end of the day, you want them to remember you. Were you engaging and professional when you met with them? And did you get your message across professionally, but also concisely and quickly? And did you show them that you knew what you were talking about? The key, of course, is being prepared. And not just with the information that Ken talked about. But when you go in there, of course, you want to bring your business cards. But one of the things you want to be careful about is how much material you bring with you. Remember that these defense contractors are probably traveling from somewhere else, and they're going to be meeting with a number of other potential suppliers. They don't want to carry 30 pounds worth of paper on the plane back home with them. So you want to keep the paperwork to a minimum. What you might want to consider instead is either sending materials ahead of time, or bring a thumb drive with your information, or use the opportunity as a follow-up to send them your brochures after the fact. One of the things you might want to consider as well is organizing your information. A catalog of all your product may not necessarily be appropriate for that particular defense contractor. Your certifications are certainly going to be of importance to them, though. Next slide, please. Okay, so now you've made it to the meeting. You've got 10 to 15 minutes to sell yourself. First 30 seconds, critical. You want them to know your name, your company name, and what you do best. Not everything you do, but what you're really good at, what your specialty is. You can't do everything, and they know that. So remember, too, that the person you're going to be meeting with may not be an engineer or a technical person. So try not to get too technical, but you want to set out what your value proposition is. Not the value proposition that Ken talked about, which sets out what the government is looking for in a bid, but really what you have to offer. Keep in mind that these defense contractors are huge companies with multiple lines of business in a lot of cases. And if you know exactly which line of business you have an offering for, then you should let them know. And it may not be in their defense line. Perhaps you have a better fit in their commercial or their industrial line. And if you do think you have a fit with their defense line, and you know specific projects that they're planning to bid on, let them know how you fit in there. Maybe you can offer brackets or steps or stools or weapon stands for the logistics vehicle modernization trucks. Or maybe you can offer sensors for the Arctic offshore patrol ship. If you know approximately where you think you fit, let them know that. You want to make sure that you set yourself apart. And I know Ken has mentioned this before, but this is really important. Here's something to think about. Before a defense contractor can actually accept a new supplier in their supply chain, they're going to have to go through a few things, and it's going to be a time-consuming and expensive process for them. They're going to need to confirm certifications. They're going to perform an audit of processes and quality, and they're going to want to determine what tangible advantage the new supplier offers over an existing one. That's right. They already have a full supply chain, and if they're going to be taking a new supplier, more than likely another supplier is going to lose their spot in the supply chain. As an example, a military truck may have something like 18,000 parts, and those 18,000 parts may be offered by about 1,500 suppliers. Why should you be one of those suppliers? You want to make that argument in a very compelling way. Next slide, please. Okay, you've made it through the meeting, you've sold yourself. Now what? Follow up, follow up, follow up. If you promise them electronic materials or samples, send them. You want to keep in touch. Just remember that the procurement process is a really long one and that these people are very busy. Weekly phone calls probably won't be appreciated. But you do want to keep in touch every few months. And if you're going through some changes, if maybe you've acquired new capabilities, or maybe you're going to new markets, or you're expanding, let them know. They need to know how you're doing and that you're still interested. The other thing you want to do is you want to keep in touch with your regional development agency. And why do you want to do that? Well, it's our job to help you understand the industrial and technological benefits policy and all of its requirements. We're also there to help promote your capabilities when we go to meetings and trade shows. The other thing we do is we set up business-to-business meetings with you and defense contractors, and we set up supplier development tours where we take these contractors into your business. We're there to help you connect with the defense industry. And not just with contractors who are looking to bid on future projects, but also with contractors who have current obligations to meet. Finally, you want to remember to be patient. The procurement cycle is long. The government starts to engage with industry years before an RFP is even released or awarded to anybody. And if you're to become a part of a supply team, even in 2018, you may not actually see the work until 2020 or 2021. The other thing you want to remember is not everybody can be a supplier directly to the defense contractor. And sometimes they actually try to keep that circle a little bit smaller. But that doesn't mean that you don't get a chance to participate, because those direct suppliers, or as we call them, tier 1 suppliers, they're also going to be looking for suppliers in Canada. And so you're probably wondering, well, how do I connect with those suppliers then? And there's a couple of different ways. Sometimes when a project is awarded, the whole team of the bidder and the winning bidder and their tier 1 suppliers are announced. Sometimes those tier 1 suppliers are actually listed on their website. But the other thing you can do when you're meeting with a defense contractor is you can actually ask them to introduce you to some of their tier 1 suppliers. I think that kind of brings us to the end. Just remember that, the defense industry is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. So before we end, I'm just going to remind everyone that here is our contact information. Please keep in touch with us. We're always happy to hear from you. We want to know what your capabilities are. And we will be distributing this presentation in the next few weeks. The notes to our presentation will be there as well. And when we do send you the presentation, we'll also include links to things like buy and sell and the Defense Acquisition Guide and the policy itself. And yeah, we hope to hear from you soon. And I think now we're ready to start taking questions.
And we'd be happy to field any questions you have, and there may be some that you have which perhaps we can talk about later if the response is a little too long. But any questions you have, we would encourage you to write in. You'll find a box at the bottom of your screen. And in the interim, another thing that we'll be happy to send you a link for will be for the defense policy, Canada's new defense policy that was released last year, strong, secure, engaged. And I think that's a document that the government is promoting as something that'll be really big guiding document. And in it, you'll find mention of some projects specifically and others more project types. So, before we proceed, I hope that this has been a helpful session for everybody who tuned in. We're also going to have this presentation as a video available at a later point. We just have to figure out how and where. For now, I see right now we have not received any questions, so I hope that means that we were extremely thorough in our presentation. Natalie, anything to add at this point?
Yeah, actually, I was going to say one of the questions I've received in the past that I think is kind of an interesting question. As people are doing their research, many people have asked, how do you find information on buy and sell? We're not quite sure how to navigate the site. And one of the things I always recommend is they go to the Office for Small and Medium Enterprise, which is really there to help Canadian small and medium enterprises do business with government. They actually have webcasts and webinars on how to use the buy and sell website. So definitely something to keep in mind.
And we have our first question.
We do. How would a startup, pre-revenue, pre-manufacturing, approach these meetings? Oh, that's a good one.
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is consistent with what we said earlier. You have to be able to set out the differentiator. What is it that you offer? And if you can set that out clearly, a defense contractor has to be interested in and to be blunt, care about what it is you're setting out. So I think if you're able to set out quickly and clearly what it is you offer, how that's relevant. It doesn't matter what size company you are. It may impact with whom you work, be it a tier 1 eventually or a defense contractor. But hopefully that helps. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, perhaps when we're talking about pre-manufacturing, I'm sort of going to take a shot in the dark here and think that it's you've invented a new product. And in which case, defense contractors are always looking for innovations, and they do.
Definitely. They
do often look for Canadian innovators. So definitely don't be afraid. Don't let the fact that you're pre-manufacturing at the pre-manufacturing stage stop you from talking to them. Definitely let them know what's your innovation and what's special about what you have compared to what's already existing on the market.
And how you think this is relevant to the defense contractor who you've researched. Shall we look at the next question?
Sure. How do we get to the approved suppliers list?
You want to take that one?
The approved suppliers list, is that the suppliers list you were talking about with regards to the defense contractors?
Well, I think, sometimes you have a couple of different suppliers lists. Now, I'm presuming you mean with a specific defense contractor. So in that regard, many of them have
an online supplier portal.
An online supplier portal. Couldn't have said it better myself. And so that's a place you can access. The other thing you can do is, quite frankly, when you're at the meeting, ask. Talk to them about this. Different companies run things in different ways. It's another way, but you shouldn't just rely on this, because you got to remember the supplier list and supplier databases that these companies have are enormous.
Yes. Oh, and it's important to note that not every defense contractor has a suppliers list. Some of them do, some of them don't. But all of them assure us that the suppliers lists, when people register on their online portal, it goes directly to their procurement departments. So when they are looking to purchase, they will actually go through this list and look for potential suppliers.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I'm not sure we have any more questions. Those are two really great questions. So again, we are here. This is to help you out. We do have another question, but let me also say that we are here to help you out. So at any point, you can email, you can call. So this is a point in time for questions, but we can take these at any point. Natalie, you want to
Okay.
read the next question?
Thanks very much for an informative session. Thank you. Can you please provide a list of which slides that a prime would like to see specifically for the initial meeting? Okay, that's a good one. So they'll definitely want to
That's a
know
good question.
again your company name and what your areas of specialty are, what your certifications are. That I think those are like really key, and where you think you fit in. So it doesn't have to be a very long presentation. They're not looking for 30 slides. That's for sure. But definitely you want to hone in on those specific points. If you know specifically what you can offer for a specific project or a specific branch of their company, they'll definitely want to know that as well.
And look, I mean, let's use an example. If you're attending a trade show and you're going into B2B meetings with a defense contractor, bear in mind they're going to be meeting with a lot of different firms over the course of the day. So by the end of the day, their heads will be full. So what's the most important thing? The most important leave behind, I would suggest, is if they leave the venue and are able to determine, hey, what made me stand apart? What is my differentiator? And I think if you do that, then you're in a good place.
I think some of the best meetings companies have are the ones where they come back to us after and say, I remember talking to this specific company. How are they doing? So you know those companies have done well. And those are not the companies that necessarily came in with a full brochure, but who were really able to get their message across quickly and concisely.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is an interesting one. How do you see the defense sector in the next 3 to 5 years as far as growth? Well, I'm going to be very careful in how I answer this because this is in many respects a political question. So what I will say is this. We have a new defense policy. That's a really good thing in my view. We have the various areas of the armed forces which have set out their areas of priority. For example, on the Army side, it's logistics vehicle modernization and some other logistics projects. We have other things coming. We have the future fighter procurement that's coming up. I would be loath to get in any way as a public servant into any political commentary or whatnot. So what I'll simply say is refer to the defense policy document, and I am hoping, I think we're hoping, that in fact there's considerable growth in the next while. Anything to add to that?
No, but thank you. I see we have another question, and it's a really good one, actually. What can the government do to help a small company connect with a defense contractor?
Excellent question.
I love this question. One of the reasons we ask you to keep in touch with your regional development agency is because we work directly with the defense contractors. Sometimes they come to us with specific requests, and they'll say, we're looking for companies who can do A, B, and C. And we look in our regions to see who can do this. And we'll get in touch with you and see, are these capabilities really what you can do? And then we'll send your name along to a defense contractor. The other thing we do is we set up events. So for example, I'm just going to do a little plug here. FedNor is actually holding an event in North Bay in March. And we will have defense contractors there looking to meet with Northern Ontario companies. That's a great place to meet. There are other events that happen in Southern Ontario as well. So the Best Defense in November and the Made in Canada show in March. So we're always there to help do introductions. The other thing is if you approach us with ideas, sometimes we have an idea of who to connect you with. We know that somebody's looking for something that you're doing. So we'll help connect you there as well.
And one of the main things we do is promote capabilities. That's our job, and we work with a lot of folks to do that. And one of the organizations that we work very closely with is the Ontario Ministry of Economic Development and Growth, with the provincial government, and we work very closely with them to help do exactly what you asked, promote you to defense contractors. And it can be at events, it can be on supplier tours, as Natalie said. So there are lots of different ways.
Yeah. I see here we have another question regarding becoming an approved supplier. And I know that becoming an approved supplier can actually be a bit of a longer process, right?
It can be, yes.
So in some cases, like, as we've mentioned, you'll register on the online portal. And in other cases, the defense contractor won't have that online portal, so you'll be meeting with business-to-business meetings and hopefully getting that second meeting. And hopefully then, as they become interested in your product or service, they'll want to come and visit your location. They'll start doing those audits that we talked about, verifying your certifications, doing your quality and process audits and that sort of thing. It can take some time, but please, as we mentioned, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Be patient.
Now, next question. Can you advise which slides they would like to see in the pitch deck and which slides to leave out? Well, again, I think as long as you're getting across the notion that here's what we do, here's how we're different from others in our space, and here's how we relate to you and to what we think you're chasing as a project, then that's really important. One thing to leave out, which is a really good question, is too much detail. If they want more detail, they will ask. So if you're providing slides and slides and slides of dense technical material, for example, what types of machines you have, other types of things like this, I would argue, and Natalie, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think that is best left for when they actually tour your facility, if you get to that point. At the beginning, focus in on the why should I care, which is simply what is my differentiator, what can I do that can help you out.
The only time I would bring in specific equipment is where it's really something very, very specialized that really sets you apart and that nobody else seems to be doing either in your region or in the province or in Canada. If it's really something that's very specific to you, that's very specialized, then yes, maybe that's an appropriate time to talk about equipment, but letting them know that you have like 7 CNC machines and 3 of them are 5-axis machines and 2 of them are 7-axis machines,
you don't need to at this point.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
How should a company with a new product enter the defense industry? They do not know this product exists. Oh, that's a really good question as well. I like it. So there's a couple of different approaches, I think. It really depends on whether you think that you want to sell directly to military or whether you think it's a product that would best fit in with a defense contractor. So there are programs out there, such as the Build in Canada Innovation Program, for example. So if you're just about ready to go to market with your product, you might want to apply to the Build in Canada Innovation Program, and it's a great way to then be introduced to military. The other thing is the Defense Research and Development Canada is also always looking for new solutions to test out for military. So if you're thinking you want to sell directly to military, that's probably a good way to do it. If you're looking to sell more to a defense contractor because you think it's a part of a vehicle or part of a, something that a defense contractor does, definitely get in touch with Ken and I. We may be able to help you do a little bit of research with regards to what type of product you're doing and where it might fit in and what kind of companies may or may not be interested in a new product like that. We may also be able to help you research. You can actually look it up online as well. Who has current obligations in Canada and who is actually looking for some of those innovative solutions?
Talk to us.
Exactly.
Now, is there a listing of major defense contractors available? I think the answer to that is yes. There are various types of lists. Certainly, Natalie alluded to it a moment ago, which was Industry Canada, or ISED, has a list of outstanding obligations and contractors who have previously won contracts and still owe offset obligations to Canada. So they have a list of those. So that's not a bad place to start. The other thing is to look at the Defense Acquisition Guide. Look to see what kinds of projects are coming in the near horizon and the further horizons. And that will help inform, because certain types of defense contractors will only work in with certain types of platforms, certain types of projects, whereas others, your Lockheed Martins, for example, are a lot more broad in terms of the different types of things that they will tackle. And again, the other thing you can do is if you're wondering, hey, where do I go? Flip us a note or give us a call.
And a lot of times too, you'll see articles. There's an upcoming project, and we suspect that these 4, 5, 6 potential bidders will be interested in this particular project. So there is stuff in the media as well that you can look at. There are also associations. So there's the CATSI, the Canadian Association for Securities and Defense Industries in Canada. They have a list of their members online that you can look at as well. There's information a little bit peppered everywhere, so it's about keeping an eye open for sure. Our next question: is it possible to do a product demonstration during a meeting? And I guess the short and the long of it is, if you can respect the timelines of the meeting and do a product demonstration, then it can be appropriate. If your meeting is set up for 10 or 15 minutes and your demonstration is going to take a half hour, it's not going to work. But if your demonstration is short enough that you can actually do it in that timeline, and that's the best way for you to sell, I personally don't see any issues with that. Ken?
Now, I would also get back to something Natalie put out earlier, which was one of the goals of this first meeting is to get a second meeting. And sometimes what happens at a second meeting is, hey, can we actually see your product? Whereas the first meeting, you're trying to whet the appetite for what you can do. It also depends, quite frankly, on what kind of product you have. If the product is enormous, probably not practical at a defense show. If your product is something that's textile based or ceramic based that you can actually have in a case with you, then again, that's I guess that's a case-by-case game time decision.
Where can I find a list of events?
Good question.
So to be frank, I've never seen a full list anywhere. They're kind of advertised a little bit here and there, depending on who's putting them on, and is it being organized by one of us, or is it being organized by an association? But by all means, get in touch with us. We're happy to share a list of events that are coming up. Ken? So
a couple I would point out. So CADSI, their website will have events that they're associated with. So these are the larger events, both in Canada and internationally. The one in Canada, which is most prominent, is CANSEC, which happens every year late May in Ottawa. It's Canada's biggest defense show. You can also look to the Southern Ontario Defense Association website, and they'll often have things there. The Ontario Aerospace Council also has lists of events they have. There are plenty more around. Contact us if you're having trouble finding. You can certainly do a search engine check on defense shows in Canada, and you'll get various lists coming up. There is no one definitive list that I'm aware of either. So again, it's sort of putting these things together, but we can certainly help you with that. All right, I'm looking at the next question, and thank you for that question. I've already mentioned that there will be an event for Northern Ontario in North Bay in March. As for the rest of the question, I think we will address it later on, one-on-one. Thank you. Now, another question. Being as defense programs are usually long to launch, what is a good way to get involved early on, the indirect side of offset requirements, if available? So, that's a great question. There is really no singular answer to that, because again, I think, where do you start? The starting point is making sure that a defense contractor becomes aware of what it is you do. What is your specialty? What is your wheelhouse in terms of your capabilities, your products, your services? Then you can sort of build on that through the discussion. When you talk about indirects, these are things that take time and can spin off from discussions and these capabilities. I wish there was
An easy answer.
secret sauce answer for this, but there isn't one.
And the other thing to keep in mind as well is some of the defense contractors who are looking to bid on future projects already have obligations on existing projects. So that might be a good way to get introduced and to working with that defense contractor. It may not be big projects to start with. It may not be big contracts to start with, but it's their way of getting to know you and really getting to know what your capabilities are.
Next question, do you see a supply shortage in the defense sector? What's your view, Natalie?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think that it really depends on what area of the defense sector we're talking about. I think if we're looking at, for example, the shipbuilding, Canada had not built ships in Canada within their country for 25, 30 years, and I think for a good while there was a shortage there. I think that we've been working with the shipyards and defense contractors to address that, and there's been some training that's been being developed to train more people to regain those skills that Canada has lost. In other areas, I think that we're doing all right. What do you think, Ken?
Well, I think that's an excellent answer, and I think the other part of this, quite frankly, is if you look at it from a higher level view, defense contractors who have done work in Canada or are doing work in Canada will already have a pretty significant supplier base. Those who have not done work in Canada before and who are bidding, obviously, if you wanted to find that as a supplier shortage, it's more like the absence of suppliers. So they will be looking for new suppliers. I guess for me the most important point is this: if you have something to offer, they're going to want to hear about you and know that you exist, exactly, and know what your differentiator is. So regardless as to whether you have a supplier who in Canada already has hundreds of companies in their supply chain, or one that's new to Canada that doesn't, it's the same play. You have to be able to show why you stand out and why they should be interested in working with you.
Well, I think those were all our questions, Ken. We had some really interesting questions.
Great questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate your time and your attention and your questions, and we hope to hear from you soon. Feel free to keep in touch. Again, our coordinates are on the last slide of this presentation deck, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
And we'll be sending you out materials in the coming while. Thank you so much.
Thank you.